All right, everyone, welcome to the Product Roundtable for March 2025. I'm always excited, but today I'm even more excited, if that's possible, the mostest excitedness. And because we have, as always, great guests, new guests, we're going over awesome topics, and probably coolest is that we have a sponsor from Neon Pay who is making this available to everybody. It's going to be recorded and you can watch it afterwards. So we're super appreciative of Neon Pay. If you're not familiar with Neon, they are a platform built for games for direct to consumer web stores. Their tech is optimized to drive profit margins. They basically allow you to build, launch, and manage a web store from scratch or embed checkout into your web store shop. They have a merchant of record. They provide detailed checkouts. And most importantly, their team focuses on partnership and customer support. That's why I think they align well with Liquid and Grit because we always feel like we're a partner. And anecdotally, I met with them and they were like, hey, we'd love to do something cool together. I proposed this. They were so down. They were like, that sounds amazing. We'd love to help out the gaming community. We'd love to sponsor this and all that great stuff. So we're super excited. And they guide you with every step of the way. So check them out at neonpay.com. We're super pumped. So thank you, Neon Pay. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it off to the amazing Tiffany, who I did meet at GDC last year, this time in person. And we're super appreciative to have her. And she's going to take things away. I may chime in, but otherwise, Tiffany, with the new mic.
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to do what I think is like our second installment of web stores and everything direct to consumer. So we had a bit of a primer on it that was a bit more general, looking at Monopoly's Go web store, I think a couple months ago. I don't know if anyone wants to share those reports in the chat here for our subscribers. I think we also had JK on that one. Now we also have Michael Lewis, who is just like an expert on D2C. So here we're going to get a little bit more into the meat of, okay, you have your web store, maybe you know some of the basics. You know that you can avoid the 30% platform fee by pushing more payments there. But how do you really drive like repeat spend and larger spend behavior? So we have 2.5 reports, I would say, how to sell battle passes on web stores, featuring Supercell, of course, and a few other examples, and also on in-app credits. And then we have a little vignette in the end with a huge casino with really the meat taken from a third report on how to avoid a 7-day commission window, which is a real zinger and honestly news to me. So I really hope some of our panelists have some good takes on this one. Before we do meet the panelists, just as a general primer on how this tends to work for all of our new viewers. So we have discussion questions every couple slides. First, we do key takeaways, and then we sort of go in and we go in report by report. Any one of my amazing panelists, please interrupt with any kind of insights that you have from your experience. But we try to focus the meat of the discussion, I would say, every like 3 slides or so that we don't get caught up on every single slide. Also, if anyone is looking at the slide and they have more questions from our viewers, please just throw the question in the chat and then we will try to answer it in the flow. And we also try to leave 5 minutes for questions at the end. Great. Why don't we go into who's here today? So I am Tiffany. I think you guys know me already for most of you. I'm on the Rise and Play gaming podcast, and I've also recently transitioned into more of the gaming side of consumer. So I'm currently the principal PM at GoFundMe for their new product vertical that is really gamifying giving and making it fun, as well as starting a new social product. So I would say, hey, look at the website in June. Let's give you some time. Look at a quarter. Also, I think how I met Chris Fott, the CEO of Neon, our lovely sponsor, was through Cypher Web Payments, where I'm the non-executive chair on the board of directors. Oh. Okay, sorry. Emergency alert in California.
Oh yeah, just got it too.
I think we're I think we're okay. If the feed gets cut, you guys know. Yeah, we met, I think, around last Games Beat cycle at a dinner, and we were looking at doing a partnership together with Neon. So I'm pretty familiar with their product, and really like was happy to recommend them to come onto these roundtables a few quarters ago. And I love that they've made it open for everyone. I'm also just been in games for the past 10 years. So Scopely, Activision Blizzard, Mini Clip Zynga, and then recently, when I was at Scopely, I was on Marvel Strike Force as the DOP there, and we also had a big web store effort. So I always love if we can talk about those here. I think JK will also be a familiar face to you guys, but maybe introduce yourself for those who don't know you.
Hey everybody, I'm Joseph Kim, also called JK Lot. I founded gaming studio, mobile gaming studio in India about a little over 4 years ago, working on a mobile extraction shooter as well as dating simulation games, and more recently having a pretty big focus in terms of doing stuff with AI, and also do a little bit of content at gamemakers.com.
And I'll jump in. Michael Lewis.
Mhm.
Prior to, I guess, January, I think, yeah, tail end of the calendar year, I led direct to consumer for Take-Two. Take-Two is a big game publisher that owns, Zynga, Rockstar, and 2K. And just kind of built up the direct to consumer business there from basically from scratch. Prior to that, I was at Twitch for about 18 months and worked on extensions, which is Twitch's, developer app ecosystem. And then I spent about a decade at EA, kind of started Origin there and built D2C. So I guess I'm kind of like an OG D2C guy at this point, which, never really thought I'd find myself in. And prior to that, I was over at Harmonix doing like Guitar Hero and Rock Band and the heydays of the plastic era. But yeah, delighted to be here.
Amazing. We have some real OGs here. Great. Well, if we go into the key takeaways, this is kind of just some headlines of what you can expect to learn for the next 45 minutes. So we're really looking at like how can you use web stores as part of a interconnected loyalty program, both in app and also on the web, to be able to really facilitate that behavioral pattern of how do you bounce users back and forth, and what is the optimal frequency that they should be visiting this web store. A big part of that is Battle Pass experience points as an incentive. This is similar to like if you've seen the different levels of battle passes, you'll see some now that are web store exclusives that give bigger benefits like more unlocks, more rewards, or experience points. We also have in-app credits here, which is another currency that is now getting proliferated. So you can integrate in spend from the web store back to in-app with this workaround. And then looking at how you also merchandise your web store within the regulations of the platform in app so that users actually know about it, which has always been a tough thing if they don't subscribe to your emails. And then also how you're seeing more mobile app icon saves coming out there. Our example here, it will be huge to get away from Apple's 7-day commission window, which was new to me. So I'm also hoping we could possibly get some spicy or hot takes here on how we're looking versus Apple's new regulations and the Digital Markets Act popularized anti-constrictor fund. We've had a bunch of people talking about it, where now the EU is enforcing less regulations and more fair competition. So always something interesting when they put in something new there. Great. I will just go through the next slide and then we'll have a discussion question. So first we're focusing on web stores. If you look at these store pass incentives, this is a great map of all of just the different things that you could be doing. So if you're not doing a discount, I think that's like, I'm surprised actually that we don't see more of these. I think some of this actually might be that we saw originally just straight through the line a lot of discounts on web stores. And now a lot of that discount, instead of being a straight, like it costs less money, is trying to make your purchase on web go farther for you in terms of extra items, extra currencies. That one looks to be around the most popular. We also see loyalty points and loyalty experience points, which I think we'll get into the delineation there, as well as battle passes, and then where that XP comes into play. We see like Zynga's doing that, Supercell is doing it. That looks to be about it. So this is one of the newer things. Having like a loyalty stamp card, similar to like when you go to a cafe and then they give you a stamp and you get a free coffee eventually. And then also having a VIP points program. Some of these also might be a bit more similar than they look. They might just be called different things, but it looks kind of like already you're seeing that for these battle passes, players are receiving 28% of the cost of them back in web rewards, and that you're getting 62% more reward value than ones that only offer the bonuses directly on the app. So big incentive to get someone to web at least once per season for that battle pass. If we go to the next slide, we can see now some examples that we thought were winning examples here.
Why do you think, Tiffany, they're not
Mhm.
doing more discounts on the web stores?
Yeah, so I think web stores, you can't think of it as like you're just getting, you're paying 30% less fees. In reality, depending on how large the company is and how good your shared tech org is, you're probably paying 15% in fees. But all of the payment processing, the chargebacks, all of that now you actually have to pay a la carte rather than it just being folded into this 30% platform fee. So larger companies where they can actually do those payment integrations bespoke and are working on them one bits at a time, they can get maybe something closer to like 20% more than if you're doing it in app. So as soon as you're offering a 10% discount or more, then you're really cutting into the entire reason you did this effort, and that's not even counting the cost of talent. I also still think that like the web store ideal client, and I think we'll get a bit more into this in some of the later slides, is probably one of your most engaged players because they're thinking through their purchases, they're planning ahead, and they're willing to leave the app to go, and then they actually do bounce back to use all of those. Those are going to be people with higher spend profiles. So maybe they just think more that they're getting a lot more value out of having these larger purchases that go farther, and they don't need to bounce to the web as often than saving a few bucks here and there. And typically, I think as like a PM, best practice is to get people habituated into larger transaction sizes rather than smaller ones because then they tend to stay at that transaction size. So maybe they purchase on web at a higher amount, and now they're also will purchase in-app at a higher amount because they're just used to doing these like $50 purchases instead of like 30. But I'd be curious to get into the other panelists' take there too on
I got a
on
spicy.
anything
I'm going to
here
get a
with
little
what a
spicy
variety of
on this
publishers are
one.
doing.
I'm going to get a little spicy
Mhm.
on this one. I think this is a big mistake not to lean into this more. I mean, I think the battle pass. So I think there's a couple things there in terms of discounts versus, plussing up the value of the offer. My 2 cents is for most games, it makes more sense to plus up the value of the offer and to try to just generally reward players with more value rather than getting into a price war. Competing from a price perspective, even like, can you do it with Apple and Google toss, even like putting that aside for a minute, it just doesn't make sense as a retailer and as the owner of intellectual property to try to do a price war against yourself effectively. So I just think you're always better off plussing up the value, plussing up a SKU with additional value versus trying to reduce the price on it. The second thing I think is like the hardest thing to do in the web store is to get traffic. And once you have traffic, the second most important thing I think is to just really nail and reinforce the web store value proposition, because today it's definitely more of a pain in the ass, to kind of go to the web store versus just purchasing in game. So I think a battle pass, which is like a SKU that most active purchasers, or a lot of active purchasers, I should say, are going to purchase monthly. That's like the best opportunity, I think, to really reinforce the value. So my 2 cents here is like you should be thinking about, or ideally testing offers that are much more valuable. So if you're typically, giving 10%, 20% more value, you should be thinking about, 50, 75% more value for battle passes. So it's just like something you must buy. And, try to use that as a way to train people to come to the web store every month. And then I think there's other things that I just haven't really seen people test too extensively, like selling a bundle of a couple battle passes together. Like depending on how sophisticated your merchandising is, there's a lot of opportunity here to, increase the tie ratio to multiple battle passes. Lots of tactics I think you can use to like avoid some of the hit there. But yeah, I just think this is one place where like people are really leaving money on the table by not getting aggressive about it. And I've seen like way too many PMs too concerned with, oh my God, it's going to cause me to dip into the, margin a little bit for this and lose sight of the bigger picture of like, how can I get a lot of people who are active purchasers to be buying, the stuff more actively through the web. I've fought a lot of PMs on that over the years.
Yeah, Chris from Neon Pay actually wanted to also add and reiterate some of what you said, Michael, but that a lot of companies don't know that they can actually offer discounts if they were to offer it. But he does agree with your assessment, which is you don't want to be training the players to think discount, discount, discount. So
Totally.
Yeah, maybe I could also chime in a little bit, which is basically, I think that the other thing that PMs really need to understand is the characterization of the payers in their game. So for example, if you have a 4X game that has potentially extremely high ticket sizes by a small group of players, relative to like a Supercell game where you're going to have higher conversion but lower ARPU, then I think the value proposition that you're trying to present from your web store should be different, right? Because you're basically trying to overcome, if you think about it in a physics kind of way, there's kind of a force of static friction that you're trying to get somebody off of from your game to not go IP in game, but to your web store. And so by understanding specifically who's driving or who's making those big payments and then what they're looking for, I think that's the way to kind of understand how to design programs in the web store to go after those specific audiences that are going to pay there.
I think also that that does look like it's echoed in the discounted games are skewing more in the casual games. So maybe their players like care about the lower spend, and then we're
That's
seeing a
yeah,
lot more of them that are offering the extra value are more towards the core and mid-core spectrum.
yeah. So my understanding, just kind of like just kind of word on the street, some of the data that I've been hearing is that it is very difficult to get the casual players into web shop. So you're going to have a different kind of value proposition for them, in that the percentage of revenue for some of those casual games could be sub 20%, sub 10% relative to some hardcore games where you're able to drive 30% plus of your revenue through the web store.
Yeah.
Yes, we were looking at doing a web store with Subway Surfers that did get acquired by MiniClip. And one of the things that I remember looking at was 8 Ball Pool. And I think if you also look at their web store, it's clear that like they're not expecting to be driving a very significant amount of revenue through there. This was like a year ago though, so of course it could have changed, but I think it's like more of a carrot for the players who are engaged enough to really care about that, but that's not as much of a like meaningful percent of all of their purchases, and that game is largely ad revenue driven. So I think it's an interesting look at like you really have to think like what are the factors and the forces within your game, and what is it realistic for a behavioral pattern that you can start to drive with these battle passes and store incentives.
Right. And not to go too, sorry, just one last point here, not to go too far afield, but the other thing that I think that people need to think about when, in terms of the discounting or value that they're presenting in web store is to understand the kind of game that you have, right? Because, for example, if you have a consumables-based economy that's good at draining economy, like a 4X game or like a Clash of Clans that's more consumables-based versus something that has a progression frontier, where if you discount, you're just pushing players faster to your content frontier, then you want to be careful with how much you discount. Anyway, sorry.
Great. Why don't we go to the next one? Because I think we're actually hitting a lot of the points in the actual report. And I think Tim has an interesting question about what about the issues with decision making on discounts that result from inter-publisher studio dynamics, like if the studio is external. I actually don't have experience with this one, but maybe Michael does working at a large publisher. And I also want to reiterate Chris's point earlier in the chat that for those of you who do think discounts might be a good fit for you, some studios are worried that this might be not allowed by Apple because you're not allowed to have pricing discrimination or like differences on different platforms. But this is actually allowed. And I do remember going through this, and it's allowed in that if you create a different purchase ID for that item. So you do need to create like different packages, or at least this was the guidance to just be super safe about it, rather than having the exact same item map back to a different price in your in-app store. So as long as like the purchase ID is different, then it's totally fine. That might not even be technically required, but I think if you feel like, hey, I have a casual audience, they're going to monetize better with discounts, or we want to try it in a test, it definitely is something that there's workarounds there.
Yeah, and on the question of dynamics there, I mean, I just think it's really important to make sure that the incentives for the internal and external teams are aligned around the concept of net revenue. So, if you can, structure your agreements such that everyone's incentivized for, revenue net of all the fees, then I think you don't really have that problem as much because then you're in it together. But if it's, one party's incentivized based on gross revenue, that's, that you can get into trouble. I don't have a good solution for that if the contract's already structured that way.
Mm-hmm. Great. So on unified loyalty programs, this is something that I remember Epic Games did when they got Fortnite and a bunch of other games with their, I think, like Epic Crew, where you got subscription discounts that you could spend across all different games. Well, now we're seeing it happen in web stores as well with Supercell. And I think for them especially, it makes a ton of sense. So you're seeing some interesting things here that they're doing with loyalty points that you earn per dollar spent. That one, I think you can do. You can see a bunch of publishers doing it, but usually it is specific to the game. These can also be exchanged in raffles, which I find quite interesting, and then also hard currency and exclusive cosmetics. For the raffles, though, they're kind of giving you like no reason to not opt in, unless I guess you really hate the item and don't want it. But if you don't win the raffle, then you actually get all of those loyalty points back. So you only actually pay those if you win and you get physical merchandise. So I think this is really interesting. And we do have a discussion question on this for the panelists that like, what's your take on these raffles for real world items where there's sort of like no loss condition? Is this something where they're really trying to get a specific behavior in going to the store? Or also, we know Supercell is really big on brand marketing with getting this physical merch out there into the real world.
I haven't tested this specifically, but I've done a lot of stores that include physical merch. I just hate it. Like most of my career's been doing digital stuff and having to worry about inventory and shipping and returns and the rest of it. Like, I don't know. Personally, I've always just found the brand marketing like that as a great way to lose money. Rather than something that, is really accretive. This is just, focus group of one though.
Yeah, I just think about it as like do whatever it takes to get people to the web store, right? There's margin there, and so whatever you can do that's positive ROI, but spending that margin to get them there, I think you do whatever it takes, personally. So if physical items, offline merch works, great. I think that Supercell is doing a good job in terms of trying to think of whatever it takes to get them there. The loyalty points, which is a web store progression, cross-game currency, the sweepstakes stuff.
Yep.
I don't know. I personally think do whatever you can within the margin you've got.
Yeah, this goes back all the way to Poker Stars, which company had one of the best loyalty programs like back in the day, but probably still does, is that they had two systems. One was based on total spend, and then one was based on 30-day rolling engagement and spend. So they would make it so that you could have, like, you could get into a very high level of VIP or loyalty level in 30 days very quickly, but you had to maintain it. And then they also rewarded their longtime spenders and players um, as well. So that could be something added to this too. And I think having covered all the markets, casino has really led in VIP programs, and it's been interesting to see other markets maybe try or not do it or whatever, but just really have a hard time implementing it. So I think web stores is kind of the door or the entryway for more and more markets to do loyalty programs, which I think universally work.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I assume some companies are doing, but I probably see more of is for the games that are not like Supercell games, the games that are not kind of like higher conversion, lower ARPU, but that are kind of more whale driven with small conversion but super high ARPU, that you would see some crazy, crazy, crazy VIP programs where including, trips and all
Yep.
sorts of crazy stuff that we used to see in the early social days.
I think there's a few things that I guess we haven't touched on so far that I think might be worth just mentioning. So, one of those is the whole like standalone APK. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but there might be worth doing something on it at some point. You can just create an Android version of your game, incorporate billing directly, and then get people, make it so people can check out through there. That's really effective, especially in games where there's like a lower propensity to spend, or where, there's kind of higher friction, or really casual titles. I think though that like Playtika pairs that really well with their loyalty program. So, when you're over a certain tier, they'll just send you a phone that has a bunch of their, kind of games that are, standalone APKs pre-installed. They log you in, so you're ready to go. So I think there's something there where, if you just get somebody into that APK version from the get-go, then you don't have to worry about, all of the effort to get them back to the web store every day is another kind of tactic that I think can pair really well with VIP.
Yeah, and I think the alternate stores, app stores as well, because I think Flexion can handle your cross-publishing on like Amazon App Store, Samsung, all of those, and they have a lot more lenient requirements on how you do the payment processing. Although I have heard Flexion takes quite a big cut of all of that publisher revenue. So it depends how you want to skin the cat. Great. Let's move on to a few more things with battle passes in web stores. So we have another two slides and then more discussion. So we have really expensive web exclusive battle passes. So you can tell this is like they are targeting the VIPs without making it a specific VIP club. So it's kind of just, hey, let's give them like the more expensive high-end shelf. And that these have the same bonuses as in Dragon City, the Elite Pass, but it has 15 extra event XP and hero shards for the dragon most relevant in the meta. So this alone is worth $47, and you can see the extra cost for the web exclusive is 30 extra dollars. So the pass instant rewards give you basically that value, and then you get that value plus more as you unlock the engagement-based rewards, which is interesting because if you think about it, the reason battle passes are such a great deal is really a lot of players don't fully unlock all of these engagement-based rewards, but they see the pass and they see it as like that is fully realized value, which is why you get a lot of that high conversion. You can offer the lower price, and then you're also helping fuel retention by getting people to come back to actually reap those rewards. So it's interesting to see like what might happen to your margins or your economy when you are front stacking the rewards. So I would imagine this kind of pass is really rewarding for the type of player where you know that they're going to be coming back every day anyway and doing the battle pass and then some. So you don't mind giving them that value up front. And that you're going to have relatively lower conversion on this type of pass because most passes do target your dolphins and not necessarily your whales. As long as you have a mid-core and up game, your battle pass is not your main monetizer. Let's do the next
Lau did a
one, and
great job
then
with the visual design
yes,
for this one. I'm really proud of how the visuals for this one came out.
yes. Was this your work?
Yeah. Michelle.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't ask you too much on it, but
Yeah, I can't talk too much
yeah,
specifically
it's
about
a
the
good
fact
looking
here,
pass.
but it looks really good.
It is
This is
nicely designed.
actually
Shout out $70 Elite Pass too. As
Totally.
a ex revenue PM, I'm loving that price point. Wish I'd see even higher stuff.
Hey, it's
Totally.
still up there on the store, so it
Yep.
must be accretive.
No comment.
Yeah, I redesigned the Marvel Strike Force pass in app, and actually we were looking
Yes.
at doing a lot of these things with like really communicating the value up front very well and not getting mired in like all the things it can offer, because then it's actually like quite hard to merchandise as individual
That's been a
items.
big focus for us. We spent a lot of time kind of redoing a lot of the store visuals. I know this sounds like uh maybe this is a little off track, but just the whole like way that you present battle passes is a big deal. We've been, kind of investing a lot in that just to make it really clear what the actual web exclusives are. And I almost like can't say enough how important that is. Like there's a lot of problems when you just want to make sure like when somebody scans the thing, and I don't even honestly think that this one is a great example of that. We started to add like another row where we call out, like web exclusive bonuses and content, and added that into the CMS so we can kind of toggle those and like test different visuals and permutations against it, just because it's so important to be able to highlight like visually at a glance, oh, this is all the stuff I get that's exclusive to the channel. Really the way the purple row there is functioning in the in-game example, we got to get better at that. It's a big investment to try to systematize all of the little tags and pins and everything and make that something that you can kind of overlay across multiple games. But been a big focus for the team.
It's not lost on me that the button says it's 31.99, right? So that's like additional, right, to the
Yep.
previous, the upper pass. Yeah. So I think really smart there with there's a lot of discounts being shown and like a best value sticker, but also it's really not calling attention to the overall price. Like you're focusing on the upsell.
Yep.
That's my comment without insider knowledge. And then, of course, you do say the actual prices. I think they click on it to purchase it. So I think really smart. There's a lot of things in this report that are just good ideas for battle passes in general, quite honestly. Okay, let's go to the next slide so that we can try to get through the second report as well. Cool. So let's also talk about Battle Pass XP. So these experience points are helping you get through the total pass. So I think instead of just having it be tied to the like in-game actions and milestones, that it's like broken down into discrete like pass experience points. So you're kind of like able to rush ahead in the pass based off of getting these more premium like versions off of web. The interesting thing is that they're not one to one. They all work a little differently, even within the same publisher with Supercell. So I think that's interesting. That I would say maybe one of the takeaways here is that you should look at your individual game economy and what that means for your experience points thresholds. And if you want to do a unified publisher loyalty program, don't forget the differences between your games, because what can work really well for one game with free rewards that are granted right away might not work for another game. And okay, I think here we have one of our discussion questions. So, our experts, how should you guys think through the layering of offering instant completion or maybe just more experience points that are like, broken down into finer tuned shards through the pass? Where, if you think you're doing like experience points, you could offer like almost as many experience points as for the next milestone, but not quite. So I see there's like kind of some trade-offs there of which one you're really going for, because then maybe they still have to do more things to actually get that next reward. So how do you look at doing that across your different passes, like making the layering all make sense together, where you can have loyalty points, you can also have XP, you can have free grants off of the pass.
I can provide a few thoughts more from a theoretical, conceptual, hand wavy, executive hand wavy perspective. So kind of like I think the tricky thing when we think about Battle Pass XP rewards is if you think about it, we now have kind of like four layers of price value when it comes to mobile games, right? So you've got your direct IAP, then under that you've got sales and bundle sales and things of that nature. Then there was the Battle Pass, which was an additional layer of additional value for price, but part of that part of that value that you're getting is in exchange for engagement, right? Because ultimately what you're trying to do with the battle pass is you're saying, okay, I'm going to give you this value, but in exchange for that, I want to try to help build a habit for you to keep playing the game because I want that repetition in your gameplay. And at least the theory here is that you're trying to build habits within your players. And then now we've got web stores, which now have a fourth layer of price value. But if you neuter kind of like the conceptual objective of the battle pass, which is to create or is to exchange some of that value for engagement, then you're just talking about an additional layer of value rather than trying to build that engagement. So I think people should be careful when you give too much XP or too much XP bonus. I think some level makes sense. And at least when it comes to like maybe you make it variable as a season, as a battle pass season gets further and further along, you can potentially increase the rewards for catch up. But I just think that there's a danger here of going too crazy and just creating massive discounting, and depending on the kind of game you have, it could be counterproductive.
Yeah, nothing really to add. Totally agree.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really insightful. I think sometimes it can also just get really difficult on like how do you keep it all straight as a player and how much is part of like the fun of the meta doing your resource management, in which case it makes a lot more sense to have like these three programs kind of going at once in all of these different ways to be most optimized with your spend versus really like maybe more of it is on the theory crafting and how you're actually playing in game or anything that's like real time. So I think there can be like a mental load that you have to be really careful with managing when you're bringing in a new store and then that's like a horizontal expansion and then also layering new mechanics for purchases on in that store.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mental load also for the game developer and the designer coming up with, again, we've got four layers of price value, right? Like, how do you design all those things to optimize against your ARPU? This is a very difficult problem and one in which I think, if I'm being honest, I'm a little bit disappointed by some of the vendors out there, whether it's analytics or even the web shops, where I think there's so much more that they could be doing in terms of bringing better technology, better, like recommendations, or just doing analysis on how some of these SKUs and pricing should be structured. And so I think that's definitely an area where I would hope we see a lot more advances. I think that here in Silicon Valley, outside of gaming, we're seeing a lot of interesting innovations, but we're not seeing that here yet on the mobile gaming side, as far as I know.
I just had one more thing. This is kind of like, again, a side point, but you really need to be aware of the store like merchandising and the hierarchy of offers. The fold is, which is like how much you can see on screen at once, is real in e-commerce. And battle passes like typically are really interesting right at the beginning of the season and right at the end of the season. So just one of the like little things is like you just have to really make sure for content that's interesting periodically, you're really aware of where it's sitting on the page so it doesn't shut everything off. And this gets to be a lot worse when you have like, I think EMP has like four different pass tiers with, Giants Pass and Path of Valor. So it can always be an issue just to make sure like, the offers are in the right have the right hierarchy against it. And just always kind of try to be on top of that and spend time, A/B testing different layouts. It's simple, but it's important.
Yeah, shift around your store merchandising throughout the season. That is a big call out. Also, if you think you have a whole desktop monitor worth of real estate, think again.
You
I know
totally
like
yeah
80% is what I've seen about are on mobile web.
yeah.
So it's
There's little things too.
same
Like
real estate.
if you look at the bottom tiles there, we made just like that art. It was like really, really big. And then we shrunk the art down and we kept like shrinking it like every 2 months. Like the art, we'll do a new tile type where the art's a little smaller just to try to like, again, really preserve the virtual, the real estate there. And there's a lot of stuff, like, especially if your game has a really complicated economy where just, thinking about showing more things with tooltips and, flyouts and like other kinds of states to just make it so you preserve, that vertical screen real estate. You don't have to scroll for an eternity. And I think there's like, TikTok and there's a lot of places that do probably a better job than most of the stores around like being really cognizant of what's in view and, like swipes and carousels that I think, similar to Joseph's comment about the analytics, like there's a lot more we could do, on the web store side and on the vendor side to do a better job giving, PMs and teams the tools to actually merchandise content on the store.
Yeah, I think there's so much more that needs to be done, but I think we'll get there. I think some people
Totally.
hopefully will start working on it. But I do think some of these guys need to talk to other like outside of gaming because it seems like there's a
Totally.
lot more innovation outside of gaming.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I do see some of these larger publishers hiring people with e-commerce experience as growth PMs for their web stores, which I think
Yep.
is just really smart.
Agreed.
Let's actually go to the next slide and let's try to blow past these because I do want to get into the last like 4 slides from the other report. This is a great one. Typical stamp card that you would expect. I think with this one, really what I find key here is the simplicity. I have done stamp cards at a variety of publishers, and all of the ones that are like 6 spaces or less are successful. And as soon as you're getting into like, this is a whole new battle pass, it has a bunch of nodes, it has 20 milestones. Now you've like lost the like, what makes a stamp card to me successful is that have like very little mental load. I go in, I do a purchase, scratch something off. It's just in my head. Every so many purchases, I complete my card. If you want to do a bunch of linked offers, do linked cards. And then they just like get their new better card, their, gold card after they do their first card within a season. As soon as you have a card with like 20 spaces, now it's no longer incentivizing to me because I'm like, oh, I marked off like 1 space, 19 more to go. And importantly here, when you get 1 pass for free, the first card only takes 5 purchases. This is also a best practice. Don't give someone an empty stamp card. That's not incentivizing. It's that you're playing on that endowment effect. I already have a stamp, just need a few more. Maybe I can get all of them in one session on web. Maybe I make 5 smaller purchases instead of that one purchase that I came here for. And you're betting that that's like accretive. So I think there's a ton here. I think we should just go to the next slide and then we'll have like a final discussion question before we go to the next report. There's also seasonal loyalty passes. So these are, I think, like a alternate version of like battle passes, but it's only within the loyalty program. So it's yet another layer on top. And that you get these like milestones as you're making more purchases on the store. So stamp card, discrete boxes I'm checking, seasonal loyalty passes, store XP, you're breaking it down into distinct shards. And here, our only examples are games that are pretty involved, where I would think something like this might be just difficult for a casual game. And then when we get to the last slide for this section, um, here we can see just all of the different loyalty things that these top publishers are engaging in. And 40% of them have some kind of loyalty program. And then two of them have all of the above. I think like with these, my general advice would be to like figure out what makes the most sense for your players like today and start with that and then try new things to build on it, and that make sure when you're releasing these other forms of loyalty programs that you're testing and making sure it's not just like straight cannibalizing it. I also think that all of these things, they target different key KPIs. Some of them want you to come to the store more frequently. Some of them say, hey, we know you're not going to come to the store frequently. We want you in game. Make a giant purchase when you do come to the store. And other ones are really trying to tie it to your in-app progress and give you a reason to spend across the publisher. But I would just love from the panelists, like, what's your advice on like understanding the considerations when you're building this holistic program? And like, let's say you're really going to gun for like more than just one loyalty factor. Like, what's the first one you would go for in most cases? And maybe is there like a breaking point when you're like, oh no, not for that type of business?
I mean, for me, I think the most important thing is just giving people a clear reason to return to the store repeatedly. And I think just starting even with like some free currency, like daily gift, daily streak mechanics is a great way to just start to build a habit. And then when I think you have players, kind of purchasing habitually, it depends a little bit on the mechanics that you already have in game. So if you have like titles that really heavily use a punch card mechanic in game, I think it can make sense to continue that, but also to give like additional stamps as a way of like further reinforcing web store value. But I think, in terms of loyalty, like the core thing you're trying to drive there is repeat purchase amongst active players, in my experience. So, really trying to align it against that with, rewards and chase rewards. Like I think Scopely does some of the, probably does this the best of any of the stores I've really seen a lot, where, just giving you like large, incentives in order to drive repeat purchases. And then I think they've also done a great job in like starting to build additional ways of doing personalization on the web store so that you can give your loyalty points can unlock things on the web without diluting the core game economy. I think is kind of the holy grail.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have too much more to add to that. I think the table stakes now, though, is some form of web store progression, exclusive content, and some form of variable reward system, whether it's a sweepstakes or whatever. And then depending on the kind of game that you have, I would think about discounting as well as maybe a high-end VIP system, depending on the kind of game and the kind of players that I think I can drive to the web shop.
I mean,
Awesome. Thank you.
I think just to add one more thing is like I think just in terms of like KPIs you should be tracking or considering, just looking at what I think the most important KPI to really start focusing on is the share of daily, weekly, or monthly active purchasers, just depending on the typical purchase cadence for your game that are visiting the web store. So I always think about it like from a portfolio perspective, how are you doing in terms of actually getting games to use direct to consumer where you're weighting based on the game's, current IAP? And then once you have, games that are using web store, how are you doing in terms of daily active purchase penetration and, weekly or monthly for games that, monetize less frequently? So I think you really need to like start there because, ultimately we're all trying to drive like as many dollars through web stores as we can, but it's just good to know, are you not succeeding in driving dollars through it because, you don't have enough actual purchasers visiting it? Is it a traffic problem? Is it a, kind of store offer coverage problem? By offer coverage, I mean, like, what percentage of the offers in game do you have replicated on the web store? Or is it a problem around, concern, like then you can kind of get into like other kinds of concerns. But I think just like starting by looking at how are we doing in terms of driving purchasers very frequently to the web and making that the main KPI, and then kind of throwing the kitchen sink at it, with like some kind of free gift mechanic I think is probably the single most important thing to do on the web.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to agree with Michael in terms of like having specific web shop KPIs, but then also I do think there should be more done in terms of overall holistic KPIs because sometimes there's some game companies that have these separate teams, and then like the web shop team might be killing it, but then your
Mm-hmm.
overall ARPU could be going down, and so just making sure you also have that holistic view to make sure that everything is accretive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would just say, like, if you do have a separate web shop team, though, I do think the main KPI to hold the web shop team to is what is the share of revenue that's flowing through the channel. Like, I've seen a lot of teams get caught up from time to time. This happened a lot at EA on, hey, our aggregate revenue is awesome right now. And it's like, yeah, because we just launched a huge game, you know, but like we really need to look at what share of revenue is flowing through the channel as the main KPI. Because that kind of buffets you a little bit more against seasonality and other kinds of effects that are outside of the web store domain. But yeah, I do agree with you, Joseph.
Awesome. So we only have a few minutes left. I don't think my dream of getting through all the reports is going to happen. But we have something I really want to get people's take on because I think it's more hot off the press that many people don't know. Also, if Chris or anyone from Neon wants to chime in on this slide, we've heard of a new 7-day commission fee where Apple will still take the 30% platform fee if someone has clicked a link in your app and then purchased from that web store within 7 days. So if they are using your links, like let's say you have a official entitlement, which you need to get in order to advertise your web store in app that says your web store has other cool stuff in it. It has a blog. It might have like a team builder. So you're not going there just for the store, but like, the store is there. Then player makes a purchase where they're going to say, actually, like that is from our platform. So what Huge Casino did here is actually instruct players to save the web client as a mobile app icon on their home screen. So maybe that first purchase, they have to pay that commission within 7 days. But then after that, they're normalizing players to return to the game or to the store as a separate app on their home screen. So just what do you guys think about this? And given the Digital Markets Act with the EU, like, is this really kosher? Is it recommended that games start experimenting with this like save to app icons kind of thing?
I'm not going to touch the purchase entitlement piece on it, but I'll just say that yes, I think in general, like adding to the home screen and encouraging users to pin the app to the home screen is a big deal. I'm actually just joining a new company right now focusing on game streaming because I think that this is like the future where drive the user to the community, pin the app to the home screen, and then just stream the game and be done with all this stuff. So I'm super bullish about this. I think it's a great tactic, and there's a lot of tech now. It's simple to kind of set a website up as a PWA, progressive web app. You have background updates. You can do push notifications. Like it starts to become really similar to to a full app over time.
Yeah, I would just say like the way I would think about it is, yeah, obviously this makes sense, but just trying to characterize every single customer touch point that you have, whether it's in-game web app icon, social, just everything that you can, and then trying to think about how you can get players or to advertise to players against every single customer touch point you have.
Sweet, Jacob.
Yeah,
Yes,
thanks,
thank you,
JK.
everyone. We are at time. Brett, I'll let you say the last words.
Yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us. And again, Tiffany for hosting, and Michael for joining us, and JK,
Sure.
and of course, Neon Pay for sponsoring this so that everyone can have access to it and join us. And then we'll share the link on our LinkedIn page and my page, likely, so you can watch it later as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. You heard it here. Throw the kitchen sink at it, download the web app icon, and create a new currency stream for in-app credits. It's all groovy from D2C experts. See you guys.
Cheers, guys. Yeah.